part 2 of the oldest baseball card known to exist right now. Hey, it's Mike. Thanks for tuning back in. Today's Friday, which means it is Attic Find Friday, the best day of the week. First of all, if you haven't already watched last week's features what was then known as the oldest card in existence, oldest baseball card from 1865 Brooklyn Atlantics, and I go into the history of the team and things like that, which I will not do, even though this is another Brooklyn Atlantics team card. So go back, watch that video from last Friday. I think you'll learn a lot if you haven't already watched it. Before I get going, it's funny to me, I have all these cards behind me on my wall, and if one of them is flipped upside down, I get half a dozen comments asking about it. Or if I've traded one out for another one, I get half a dozen comments about it. But I have been missing this middle card, my Carl Yastrzemski rookie card, all week long, and nobody has noticed it. You'll find out why I'm missing it probably tomorrow. I'll have a video about that card and why it's missing and what I am replacing it with. So make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. Also, you should subscribe because I do Attic Find Friday every single Friday, and I still have more to come. And tomorrow is also, I'll go through a mail day a little bit too. So let's talk about the oldest known card in existence. Last week, as of 2013, it was known to be an 1865 Brooklyn Atlantics team card. But then the next year, an even older one was found, and it was thanks to the 1865 card that it was found. So Florence Sasso in 2015, I guess so, more than a year later, I don't remember, maybe it was 2013 or 14, the 1865 one was found. Florence Sasso in Massachusetts brought an album of cards and old family photos, and she was into genealogy, and she brought it to the Claire Teague Senior Center in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. And Florence, 74 years old at the time, frequented the senior center. I'm assuming she had friends there or family. So she would bring her albums, and she was showing her album, and somebody said, "Hey, that card looks like one that was sold in Maine last year for $92,000. And Florence was shocked. It was a card that she had had in her family for, at the time, 155 years. And it was a 1860 team card of the Brooklyn Atlantics. Again, just like the 1865 one. It had 9 of the team players, all 9 players, because back then you didn't have 25-man rosters. 9 players in uniform, and then the team president and the team secretary flanking them. So, by the way, I got a lot of these details from the Boston Globe, so I just want to make sure I give credit to my source. They had a great article about this. So why did Florence have this card? Well, Florence, 25 years before, back around 1990-ish, was really into genealogy, and her mother gave it to her and said, "This has been part of our family for a long, long time, more than a century, and your great-great-uncle, Archibald McMahon, is on that card." Now, nobody knew which one Archibald McMahon was. They just knew he was a member of the Brooklyn Atlantics and that he had to have been on that card. And so Florence thought it was cool. It was just this yellowed piece of cardboard, basically, a piece of paper. And so she put it in her album as part of family heirloom. Archibald had owned the card until he passed away at the age of 92 in 1928. And then it got passed around the family as a family heirloom. Honestly, it's pretty shocking and miraculous that nobody threw it away. It just kept getting passed around for probably decades until it ended up with Florence's mother. Florence's mother was a huge baseball fan, and she had a tie to the card because she was closer, I guess, to Archibald. She presumably knew him because she was 13 when he passed away, so maybe she knew him when she was a kid. But because Florence was really interested in genealogy, she decided to give it to her daughter, who kept it in as good a shape as you can expect for a card that was 155 years old. Florence tried figuring out which one he was on the card. He was an outfielder, she knows that, and she knew that her family, people in that family, the McMahon family, had big ears, and so she thought she could narrow it down by picking out a guy who had big ears, but quite a few of the players had big ears, so she wasn't really able to narrow it down that much. So sitting at the senior center, she realized she might have something very, very valuable, so she decided to call Heritage Auctions. Chris Ivy of Heritage Auctions either went out himself or sent somebody out to authenticate it. He says it's the only team card from before the Civil War. This is from 1860. Civil War started the next year in 1861. So there's significance to it there. Of course, the 1865 card was well into the Civil War. So he thinks that because of that, it was worth more money. As part of the provenance of the card, she showed him the obituary she had of Archibald McMahon to prove that it had been in her family ever since then, ever since he had died, and then before that, obviously, since he was part of her family. Earlier I said Archibald McMahon had owned it until he passed away in 1928. I think it was actually his brother, John, who had owned it all those years. John McMahon. So when Heritage told her that it would probably fetch 6 figures, she called her mother. Her mother was 101 years old, and her mother loved the card. It was a family heirloom, like I said, but she knew it would really help Florence, so she told her, go ahead and sell it. Florence, in her 70s, has never been debt-free, still had a mortgage, and said that being able to sell the card would really help her, for the first time, maybe become debt-free. She would also buy a new TV for the senior center and some other things like that. Kind of a neat story there, obviously. She got it graded, or Heritage got it graded for her through SGC. It came back SGC Authentic. Has some paper loss on the front. It's obviously very worn. The card is extremely old. It ended up selling for $179,000, well over what they expected it to sell for. So I hope Florence was able to pay off her mortgage and do other things that she was hoping to do. What do you think? Is there an older card out there? There is something that some believe to be a card. It's an old baseball ticket from 1844. It was produced as a ticket. I don't know if I would consider that a baseball card. It also doesn't have necessarily, just like this one, it's a team card. But yeah, I'd be curious to know what you think. Is there a card that's out there that just hasn't been discovered of a single player, let alone a team? I would love to see it. Every Google search I've done brings up this card and last week's card. So if there is one, I'm not aware of it, but that doesn't really mean much. I want to pause here for a moment and just say that there was another one that was found in 2019 of the 1860 Brooklyn Atlantics. It was graded in SGC 3 and sold for the same amount through Heritage for $180,000. So very cool. There are a couple of them out there. All right, guys. Hope you have a great weekend. Again, I'll be back tomorrow with an explanation around my missing Yaz rookie card. Put your guesses down below. Let me know. Hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you tomorrow.